Welcome to the Women in Wellness podcast,
where we believe that the world can be changed one woman at a time.
Your journey to becoming more present, healthy, and joyous starts right now.
Hello, Women in Wellness Tribe. Welcome back to our keto and diet and fasting and everything in between episode. We are doing a whole series on this because we get asked questions all the time about what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. This isn't working. That diet doesn't work. I am a unicorn. Nothing works, and everything in between. And so if you didn't listen to our last fasting episode, or fasting and keto episode, make sure you go back and listen to that because we're constantly going to be building on the same ideas. So today we're going to talk more specifically about the keto diet and how we incorporate the keto diet into our lives so that hopefully it can help you guys incorporate it into your lives to get the results that you're looking for. So, Dr. Mindy, why don't you start with basic keto? Like when somebody types in ketogenic diet into Dr. Google and the things that pop up aren't always 100% accurate, but what is the general idea of the ketogenic diet? Like what is it that you hear?
Okay, so general without dropping like measurements is it's low carb, moderate protein, high good fat. So I think that's like the most important thing to understand because most people know it's low carb and they think it's high everything else and it's not. So that would be the first thing I would say. The next layer to that is, and I think you guys are in alignment with these measurements, I encourage my patients to do under 50 grams of net carbs, under 50 grams of protein, and over 60% of their diet coming from good fat. To me,
clarify net carbs?
Yeah, net carb. Oh, define them. So net carbs is you take the carb and you subtract the fiber and you're left with the net carb. So
and why is that important for keto?
Well, because fiber will help stabilize your blood sugar. So if you eat a carb that has no fiber, it's going to spike your blood sugar a lot more than a carb that has fiber. Fiber is a beautiful stabilizer of your blood sugar. So you actually, and I'm sure you guys see the same thing. I see people that get like, oh my gosh, how am I going to stay under 50 carbs, but they don't realize it's net. So they think they're going to eat one carrot and all of a sudden they're out of ketosis. And I think let's just say this in the beginning of this episode, you can be in ketosis and eat vegetables. Your body needs you to eat vegetables. This is not a vegetable-free diet. And Dr. Sonia, I know you're like a living example of that, but I feel like I want a shirt that says like, go keto and still eat your vegetables because it's so dangerous to stop eating vegetables.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll have to get one of those made. I remember one of the first HCF seminars I went to and on stage someone had said like, when you're a vegetarian, you can't get into ketosis. And that, that little competitive side of me was like, I will show them. We are getting into ketosis. And I so rapidly get into ketosis because we are eating vegetables and lots of fat. I think that is the key there is the fat component, that 60% that Dr. Mindy was talking about, making sure you're getting that. And then the net carb description I think was fantastic because people do get confused. Like we can have vegetables. You need vegetables. Your body needs vegetables in order to get the nutrients it needs.
And I think the confusion with vegetarian, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is most people when they go vegetarian, they substitute meat with grains. Okay. And so getting into ketosis on a high grain diet, it's not likely to happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But getting into ketosis, eating lots of veggies is absolutely going to happen. So I'm by no means vegetarian. I do go days where I am completely vegetarian in a row and I have no problem with it. I love my veggies. And I get into ketosis like you wouldn't believe. Like I think I say this all the time. My favorite vegetable is kale and chard. Like I could eat bundles of it daily. But you got to get your veggies. You guys are absolutely right.
And I would also add on to that, that it's also protein. Like what I think that people, when they go lower their carbs, they up their protein. And I think that moderate protein, I just want to go back to how important that is, that you have, you know, I know when I do fast mimicking, which is no animal protein, I get into ketosis just fine, especially if I watch my carbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really is essentially my diet. Like mine is more fasting mimicking, probably less grains, except for when Dr. Caitlin comes over and we're eating out. I end up getting,
which is the only time I get greens.
Yeah, so and we're going to talk about variation later, but I definitely don't have meat protein. Like I said before, maybe once in the blue moon, once in a month, maybe once every 2 months, but I get into ketosis very quickly, and that's with the non-meat proteins.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think so. What, Dr. Sonia, why don't you share a little bit about like what would a meal, a couple days worth of meals look like? Because I'm going to be honest, like I used to, when I first got into the ketogenic world, I didn't think you could be a vegetarian and get into ketosis, and then I met you guys. And I was like, oh, okay. And then actually, you know what really like has me convinced is when we all did Prolon together. Yeah. And you were like kicking butt in ketosis. And it took, well, I'll just speak for myself. It took me a couple of days. And you're like, well, maybe that's just because of the way I normally eat. So anyway, so talk about that, because you are a perfect example of a keto vegan. Are you vegan?
I'm not vegan. No, we have animal products like there's cheese in our house, there's butter, ghee is a big part of what we eat too. So I avoid dairy just for hormonal purposes, but we do have it once in a while. So I can't call myself vegan. So essentially a day in our house, what it would look like are meals, half the plate's vegetables. And like Dr. Caitlin, we love our greens. So it's got to be lots of greens, lots of good vegetables. I'm also a fan of sweet potatoes for the progesterone. So I use a lot of sweet potato, not throughout the entire year, but mostly fall and winter. And then I have beans or lentils. And then we'll have our avocado, oils, olives. So definitely have a lot of fat. The ghee, we'll have spoonfuls of like nut butter if we need to afterwards. But that's essentially a meal in our house. And lunch and dinner don't look any different. There's lots of days where we're only having dinner. The kids' meals look exactly the same, unless, again, we're eating out, we will have some gluten-free grain or something. I would say before getting into this path of ketosis, we would have, like we eat a lot of curries, so we would have rice and curry on top. And then what I did slowly was switch that, where I would have curry with some rice on top, and then switched it again, just took the rice completely out, which is really odd for an Indian person to say. We are brought up with a lot of, chapatis and rotis and rice with our curries. And even for me to wrap my head around that took a while, but as we did it, now it's no problem. Now I just have other options. I use chickpea flour or something else so that we can still stay more grain free. So really, it's really simple. We eat really, really simple. And I think that's the key. I think we overcomplicate in our minds of what a keto diet needs to look like, but really it's so simple.
Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sonia, but you guys do a lot of really thick, creamy soups too.
Yes, lots of coconut milk. So that way you're getting that fat in there as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you posted a smoothie the other day that looked amazing. What was
my fat shake? It's avocado. It's got nut butter in it, just spirulina, and then flax, hemp, and chia, and water. And that's my fat shake. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have to post that on Women in Wellness page, because that looked amazing. And I know that one of the other things that I get a lot of questions on are, how do I get fat? Like, where am I going to get fat from? And I mean, Dr. Caitlin, you can share where you get fat from, but I'm like you. I take a spoon and I have nut butters, I have ghee, and I just dig in there with a spoon. Like, you don't need to put that stuff on anything.
Oils, pumpkin seed oil, olive oil, just eat it.
That's right.
Yeah. You guys are bigger into the nut butters than I am. I have them, I just don't eat them that often. I don't know. I eat avocados like they're going out of style. Avocados and olives. I seriously can make a meal out of those two. Especially when you start to get like the spicy olives or, you know, the mixed olives, that kind of stuff. And actually one of my favorite things is I have this kimchi salt and I sprinkle that on top of it and I'm good to go. But using lots of different oils. So avocado oil, I do use butter and ghee. I use avocado more than I use those two. Coconut, I use a lot of, and people always say, I hate the taste of coconuts though. Well, you can get the refined coconut oil and it doesn't taste as much like coconut, but then you're losing some of the benefits. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I love the ideas of trying different oils like walnut oil, pumpkin seed oil. There's definitely oils that I won't touch just because of how our body processes it. And unfortunately, a lot of the oils go rancid, especially olive oil. So maybe we should talk about where do we and how do we determine what olive oils are good for us and we're not going to be eating rancid oils. So
Well,
how do you guys find like a good olive oil?
I think the first test is what happens to your tongue when you're taking that olive oil. If it's not going numb or you're not getting those, what's that? It's almost like when you have echinacea. If you've ever tasted a liquid tincture of echinacea, your tongue kind of gets into that fuzzy state. I love Dr. Caitlin's face there. It's the same thing with olive oil. If it's pure olive oil, you're going to know it. And if it's going down really smooth, you know it's not the right kind. It's not pure. And I know olive oil is a tricky one to really get an understanding of, and I don't think I still have a full understanding of it, but that's kind of been my gauge.
I just smell it. I do it. There's like a really distinct smell between rancid olive oil and non-rancid. And I think if you do try a really good clean olive oil, you'll know when you have a bad one. And I like, we have one at our farmer's market that's amazing. And now even when I get the one at Whole Foods, it doesn't taste as good. So I think it's also, you just gotta, it's like fine wine. You just have to like train your palate.
That's actually where I like to get my olive oils from, is the farmer's market, because then you can try it. And if it's terrible, you just bring it back and they will happily replace it for you. It's usually the olive oil balsamic vinegar stands that have some pretty amazing options.
Yeah. Yeah, we're lucky we have a local one here called Olive and Company, and they have amazing infused oils, and it's great.
So why don't we talk a little bit about fast mimicking? Because I'll tell you an interesting story I had with a patient the other day. She was struggling to get into ketosis, and there's a lot of reasons why people struggle to get into ketosis. And so she went to a local naturopath who handed her a box of Prolon and said, here's how you get into ketosis. And you just need to do that for 5 days. I know I'm watching your face. Sorry, I wasn't throwing naturopaths under the bus. The steam was coming out of my ears because I'm like, it's not that simple. So, Prolon, for those of you that don't know, is the fast mimicking diet, like put in a box, and go back and you can watch our episodes where we tried it out. On one level, I really liked it, but it is not necessarily turnkey for getting you into ketosis. Mm-hmm. So why don't we talk a little bit about fast mimicking, because there are principles in fast mimicking that are awesome, but they're not, you also may need to vary it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the key principles was the low protein. I think that was beneficial in getting somebody into ketosis, because as we know, protein turns into glucose. So that is not the energy fuel that we want when we want to get into ketosis. So I think that was key for your patient. I mean, imagine, as you know, as we talked about before, it's probably toxicity, reason being why she's not getting into ketosis. So you can't just take the box, do the Prolon, and get into ketosis. You need to do the underlying work to actually get into ketosis within 5 days. It's a bit of a longer journey to get fat adapted, as the term that we've learned. So I would say number one was the low protein. What about you guys?
I think fast mimicking, just like diet variation, is so important because you're constantly keeping your body and your metabolism guessing as you make changes. And so just to stick, and this is my personal opinion, you guys can tell me if you have a different one. If you stick on one diet and that's all you do for months and months and months and months, your body is eventually going to be like, okay, no more benefits. Like I know exactly what to do. And you'll start storing fat again, and you're going to start decreasing your metabolism. And so I love using the fasting mimicking as a way just to keep my body guessing as to what it needs to do and where and how it needs to extract the energy from the food that I'm eating. Not to mention, there's days where I forget to take out meat from the freezer. And so by the time it's time to make dinner, I don't have a protein, like a meat protein. So then we'll substitute it with like chickpeas or something else like that to get our protein in, which you still have to be careful. I'm sure you know this, Sonia, like when you switch to legumes and lentils and things like that, you can still overdo the protein very easily eating that source of protein. But I love it as a tool to keep it guessing.
I think what you said there was key. So the way I describe, and I know Dr. Mindy's going to speak more to the keto biotic, is when you look at your gut and the microbiome in there, if you compare it to a forest outside and the ecosystem out there, it's not just one type of tree or one type of animal. There's fungus in there, there are parasites in there, there's trees, there's shrubs, there's animals, there's all these other factors, and same goes for our gut. So if you're only feeding it one type of food, why would any of the other pieces or the other bacteria do any work? They can just go to sleep. So the way I describe it to the kids is like we're putting your minions to sleep. You know, they're turning crazy and purple, if you see in the Minion movies. So if we want to keep them yellow in a healthy state, then we need to have variation, and we need to feed the bacteria, like Dr. Mindy will talk about.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from Prolon was really the not doing animal protein and keeping the protein under 20 grams. I think throughout that week, what I loved about fast mimicking is that. I know that Walter Longo's studies have been done not necessarily on like compressing your eating window, but I think all three of us identified that we wanted to compress our eating window and have all our soups and everything all at the same time. And I think that helped us get into ketosis. So this woman who was handed the Prolon box, I actually told her, well, if you want to get into ketosis, I really would encourage you to fast during this time. You're going to have to compress that eating window. So, but I don't know, again, I don't know about you guys, after I did Prolon, my gut did not feel the same. I don't know what was in the Prolon foods, but it took me a couple weeks to recover. And I literally thrive off the ketobiotic diet, which is really working on when I am eating carbs, that they're coming from like sauerkraut and raw kefir. Oh my gosh, I'm like addicted to raw kefir right now. I don't know. I actually have this theory that when you need a certain bacteria to grow and you give your body that food, it becomes like your body makes you crave it more, just like fungus, like a candida would make you crave sugar. I think the good bacteria makes you want to crave sauerkraut and kombucha and kefir and things to make it grow. So I don't know about, I haven't seen any science on that, but it seems logical to me. And I think we're back to really identifying what our bodies need. And if you're not giving your body the food to make the bacteria grow, you're missing out on an incredible resource that nature's provided.
Yeah, I think
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said is key is listening to the body now. And I think this is what also frustrates people and patients. So I have a patient who will be like, okay, what exactly do I need to do? What is your body telling you? And that creates frustration because people want a plan that tells them exactly what to eat, when to eat it. But what we're teaching is variation and listening to your body, listening to the season. Where do you live? What's available? So there's so many different aspects that we're trying to teach, but yet trying to simplify. But at the end of the day, it's really about listening to your own body and what it's telling you. And like you said, maybe it's the bacteria in that moment speaking to you. It's like when you're pregnant and you have cravings, most often you're having that craving because you're deficient. Like I did crave meat in my first pregnancy, and my iron was tanked at like 5. And that was because my blood iron was low. So of course I'm going to be craving meat at that time. So
It's
yeah,
just like craving chocolate and magnesium, right?
absolutely. Yes.
Which I
And to get back, sorry?
I said, which I crave all the time, and I just allow myself to crave it.
To get back to the Prolon, I think I didn't do well because of the inulin. Like the amount of inulin that was in all of the products, I think that was what really didn't do well with me. But there's other people, and I'm sure you guys have heard, that have done amazing with Prolon. And so it is a good option. But personally, I'd rather just make my food and do my calculations and do it that way. But I'm terrible at calculating. I don't.
A lot of people are resistant. They don't want to calculate.
Yeah, I'm not a calculator either. And I have done the fasting mimicking since and gotten similar results. I don't know if I'm doing the numbers right or even like the calorie count, but it feels good. I know Mindy's a master at the counting, teaching people how to do it too.
Well, I think so. Where my brain is going with this conversation is, I think if I was listening to this and I was intrigued about keto and I didn't know what type to do, I would literally start with how we started the podcast off. I would start with 50 grams net carbs, keep your protein under 50 grams, and get over 60% of your food from good fat. Now, if you want, I don't know what a cup of beans would be, but if you want that protein to be beans, make it be beans. That's fine. But play with
beans is a lot.
I know. I bet it's a lot.
Yeah. That's for the entire village.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So I think you start there. There has to be an entry point in. So I've seen a lot of people where the entry point is under 20 grams net carbs. And I see this in my resetter group a lot. We had a lot of people come into the resetter group from who had been studying Jason Fung. And they were OMAD, 1 meal a day, and they were eating under 20 grams of net carbs, and they were stuck. They were not losing any more weight. And so when I explained to them what my basic keto was, they were like shocked. You know, they were like, oh no, that's too many carbs. But I think a really good entry is that 50, 50, 60. Like just start there, and then you can start to go off and try fast mimicking. One of the fasts that I have my resetters try is the autophagy fasting, where you're staying under 20 grams of protein, but you can have animal protein. And so then that lets you experiment with that number, but you're not necessarily going vegan. So I agree with you that it's hard because what we do preach is variation, and yet it's liberating at the same time. I was an emotional eater 25 years ago, and I feel more free around my food than I've ever in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because I started off by understanding ketosis for me. What did it mean for me to get into ketosis? And then I tricked it out. Then I try my fast mimicking day, and then I try my feasting day, and then I'm like all into the progesterone foods. I'm like a sweet potato fanatic, and even some white potatoes I go into. So I know, don't tell me. So I think that for simplicity's sake, have a starting point. Then once you understand that, then you can try these variations and see what works best for you.
Mm-hmm. My favorite is playing with it and being flexible and giving yourself the permission to be flexible, but then test and see how you do. Mm-hmm. Because you might do amazing at 50 grams of net carbs versus 20. Like your body might be thriving at that, and that's okay. That's totally okay. And then women understand that during your cycle, things are going to shift too. So you might need more, you might need less. Mm-hmm. And so just being open to being flexible and not being so, I can only do this, I can only do this, I can only do this, I have to stand under this, I have to stand under that. Play with it. Yeah. You'll be surprised, because I bet you'll actually get better results faster if you're having fun with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, follow the rules and then throw the rules out.
Right. That's
what
you
really
have to do.
True. Yeah.
Like learn them.
Yeah.
So that you can implement it, but then be okay with being like, okay, and now I'm going to just play with it and see what works for me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a little bit like if you're learning a new sport, or you're learning a new hobby, or you're learning a musical instrument. You follow what the coach says in the beginning, and you do it to a T. You learn how to master the basics, and then you trick it out. Then you go off and you do what intuitively feels right. I think that's really what we're preaching here.
Yeah, because that's what's empowering.
Yeah.
You're becoming your own listener, your own guide, and you know your body best and how it's responding. Like I'm doing a feast week this week because my body's just telling me to do that, and that's okay.
What's a feast? What's a feast?
I don't know yet. But since my fast that I did last week, I remember the next day my body was, because normally after I fast, I don't eat that much. I'm still doing like the partial and going on. But the next day, my body was like, you can do this. We can eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hear that from women a lot, that they beat themselves up because they do keto or they fast and then they rebound and they get really upset at themselves. And I think that I really want people to hear what you just said, is that if you can rebound on good food, like don't go rebound on McDonald's or Doritos, go rebound on good food. That's variation.
Yeah. And when I say feast, the next day I had a kale salad with avocado and egg for lunch instead of waiting till dinner. Right? So that was my feast during the day. So it's like what you said, you eat well, but you're eating more.
You need to feast a little more.
Yeah.
What does feast mean to you, Dr. Caitlin?
It usually means having brunch.
Right.
So like eggs and some kind of breakfast sausage with tons of like sweet potato hash and avocado. That's typically me feasting, is adding that into my equation. So feasting for me is just eating more meals throughout the day, but I'm not necessarily changing the quality of food that I'm eating. So I'm not going to go buy a bag of Doritos or a Snickers bar. I might go get a really good high quality chocolate bar and not eat the whole thing, depending on how big it is, or maybe I will. Yeah. But that's really what feasting means to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, how about you, Wendy?
Yeah, the way I like to do it is I can really follow keto and fasting during the week when I have a routine. Something about the routine allows me just to effortlessly do it. Like today, I'll just eat dinner and we'll have meat and a salad. I'm like you, Sonia, where I'll just do a green salad for half the plate. And then on the weekends, I like to give myself a little more leeway, and I will do more. Like some of my favorite foods are Jackson's Honest sweet potato chips, and I will open up a bag and let myself eat whatever I want of the potato chips. There's no guilt. I opened up the other night. We had gotten goat's milk custard at the farmer's market. It was goat's milk yogurt, a duck egg, and honey. And I sat down and I had an intention to only take one scoop of it. And I ate the whole container. And my husband looked at me and he's like, "Are you going to eat that whole thing?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, I'm going to eat the whole thing." So I think because I know that I fasted, I'm going to fast around that. I'm going to do keto around that. So, but I love high quality food. I love good food. So I want to feast on it.
Well, the thing about the Jackson's Honest is they're cooked in good oil, right?
And some good oil.
Fats. And so there's ways to have snacky foods and the salts and the chips and that without you going and eting the inflammatory foods that are just going to undo what you did.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing is the guilt, like you guys we've all said, is the guilt behind it. Like, oh, I did so good. And then I just fell off. Okay, get back on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because this method gives you so much freedom. And that's what I love about it. It's not just one way. There's so much freedom in it. And that's what we have to revel in and focus on, not on like the little details and then losing sight of like where we were, but just getting back on the course again.
But, and I will say, start by learning how to play the instrument. Figure out ketosis for you. Then you can move into the freedom. So if you're looking for structure, start with understanding. You know, one of the questions I ask my patients a lot after I've been working with them a while is, if I said to you, go get yourself in ketosis for the next week, would you know what that means? And if you can't answer that, then you're going to need to try to really play with those numbers. And then after that, the variation just becomes fun.
Yeah.
And I have one plead for everybody. If you're just going to start ketosis and the ketogenic diet, don't just eat a pound of bacon with melted cheese on it.
Yeah.
Like, that's not like the ketogenic diet. That is,
Or a container of whipping cream. I've been hearing that a lot lately. Oh, I love this ketogenic diet. I got so much whipping cream last night. I'm like, oh, no.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what rock I've been living under. I haven't heard people doing that yet. Interesting.
Yeah, just like bricks of cheese, melted cheese on hamburger, like having hamburgers with bacon and a pound of melted cheese on it. And that's not true ketogenic. And if that's your idea of ketogenic and it's working for you, okay, great. I hope you're doing good quality cheese and
yeah, right.
But it worries me though, and I'm sure it worries you guys as well, that you're going to hit a brick wall and then you're going to be like, oh, it no longer works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want longevity with this. This is a lifestyle shift that you can utilize for the rest of your life. And that's why it's not one thing fits all, right? That's why there's so much variation in it once you get the backbone.
Let's talk a little bit. I don't think we did this at the last one, but let's talk about eating around your cycle, because that really is part of what forced me to have to vary, was just that I was noticing such a dramatic shift in my cycles. And now I feel like everything's back to normal once I started carb loading and feasting the week before my cycle started.
Yeah, I'm similar to you. I think that the day of period and going up to ovulation for me, ketogenic, fasting, very, very easy. After that, there's got to be more variation. There has to be more feast days, more carbs. And that's just what feels good for me. And I think there are some women I know that are the opposite, that need the opposite way and eat less during their period and afterwards, and then want more. Mm-hmm. Nope, I'm saying it the other way around. Eat more and then eat less afterwards. So I think you have to, again, you get the backbone and then you figure out what your rhythm is throughout the month.
Mm-hmm. I'm weird. I don't know. I think it depends on what's going on in my life at the time of my period. And if I'm a little more go, then I don't need to eat as much, even if it's the beginning. So the first 14 days. But what I do is I just listen to my body. And ever since then, I've had 0 menstrual cycle cramps, none, absolutely nothing. That's not the only thing that I've done to get rid of them, but it's so freeing not feeling like crap for 5 days and like the day before.
Yeah. And those women that aren't cycling anymore, there's still a rhythm throughout the month too. So you also still need to follow that rhythm. I mean, it's called a moon cycle for a reason. And this might be getting a little bit hokey pokey, but it's called a moon cycle because it follows the rhythm of the moon, whether it's new moon, full moon. So you might even notice around certain times of the month, you are having different cravings, even if you're not cycling anymore and you're in menopause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did this with some of our resetters that were postmenopausal, is to just eat. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, ovulation can happen often on a full moon. Is that, so then that would be your day 14. And then you would like soon after that want to start doing some carb loading. That's the way that I looked at it, was like, okay, well, why don't we look at the moon and eat according to the moon? Mm-hmm. And I think, and women who are even, not menopausal, maybe they had a hysterectomy, or maybe they're not getting a period for some reason, that the moon can be a source that we can look at, the full moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's fat cycling you can do.
It worked. Yeah, it worked. The most common question I get is from postmenopausal women is, well, what do I do? How am I supposed to eat? And so I've kind of given people 3 different variations. One is you could do keto 1 week, and then you could do like what Dr. Sonia's doing. You could do feasting 1 week, and then keto 1, and then feasting. so that you're getting that variation. You could throw in some 2 or 3 feasting days in the middle of a week, kind of like a 4-2-1, or you could just look at the moon and try and figure out a cycle around that. And people, they all worked. The biggest problem that I have, that I see too, is that postmenopausal women that want to lose weight, they want to stay in with keto and fasting. They don't want to feed their hormones. They don't want to feast, and that if they're really insulin resistant, they're really scared to add in those bigger feast days. So I don't know if you guys see that or you have any comment on it, but my heart goes out to them, because it's like, yeah, okay, we're now in our 60s. I get it. Like, your cycle's been done a long time. You're trying to let go of the weight that perhaps you gained in your 40s and 50s. Keto is a great solution, and you still need to vary it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would even just take it back to anything else that they're feeling. Like, do you have brain fog? Are there hot flashes? Is there loss of libido? Is there vaginal dryness? Is there incontinence? Is there anything like that going on? Then your hormones are still needing some feeding. In order to feed those hormones, variation is still key. Mm-hmm. Because yes, our hormones decline after menopause. If we were living in the village, feeding off the land, didn't have any stress, all these hormones will decline in the way they're supposed to. So you probably could live a little bit more in ketosis and fasting, because we do eat less as we age. But because we haven't transitioned like that, your hormones are still needing support. Mm-hmm. And that comes through this variation.
And there's a lot of fear because they don't want to gain weight.
Well, the thing with that, I work a lot with insulin resistant individuals, especially women, and you have to get the insulin resistance down and the inflammation down, and then there's no fear around the feasting, the increasing your food content. But when you do that, just make sure, again, the quality is good, right? Like, you're not just going to go and drive up your grains and your carbs that way. You got to increase the amount of food that you're eating fat-wise. And fat does not make you fat, but you do have to address the insulin resistance and the inflammation, the cellular inflammation, which is why you can't lose the weight, which is why you have higher blood sugars in the first place.
And I'm playing devil's advocate today.
Love it. I like that.
So, again, I'm going to put yourself in a 56-year-old woman's shoes, and they want to lose weight with keto, and they're used to the paradigm of one pill, one problem. Mm-hmm. And that what I think is really important for that age group to realize is that just what you said, Dr. Caitlin, that keto is one part of a multi-therapeutic approach that you're gonna have to work at. And unfortunately, you're at your 50, 60 coming to this knowledge now. So there may be more imbalances going on in the body that need to be addressed. And I say that with love. And I see so many postmenopausal women just get frustrated because they watch everybody around them lose weight with keto, and they don't understand why they can't, why are they not losing it?
Yeah. Well, this is where I would even take it back to like the bigger picture of like, why do you want to lose the weight? What's the intention here? Do you want more time with your grandkids? Do you want to travel? How long do you want to live? Right? We can go to 150 if you want to go to 150, but in order to do that, we have to address these underlying things. And in the moment, it's going to be uncomfortable, but in the long run, and that long run doesn't even have to be that long. As you start doing the work, it will shift, and then there will be no guilt around the feast. So it's kind of getting back into those deeper layers and like the bigger picture of the why.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is you got to look at how long are you giving this a chance before you say this isn't working for me. 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, even sometimes 30 days isn't enough for your body to start to reset itself. So you do have to be patient with it, but then be smart enough to be like, okay, I got to change something because this isn't working for me, or reach out and ask for help. Ask somebody to help you figure out why for you it's not shifting.
Yeah, I think we talked about this once before, but in November when we were all together with Dr. Fung, I asked him that question. Like I picked his brain on, like, have you ever seen fasting and keeping your insulin and glucose down not work? Have you ever seen it not work for somebody? And he said, no, it always works. They might have to vary the situation where instead of skipping breakfast, maybe all of a sudden they skip dinner. Instead of, doing a 24-hour fast, they may have to throw some 36 and 48-hour fasts at it.
Right.
And so that was his version of variation. And I think that's hard for sure. Again, I'm just going to go to compassion that I can understand that that's hard to hang in there if you've been throwing keto and fasting for a long time. The variation, this is where you need a coach. You really need someone to guide you through that, because then you just don't know what you're going after.
Well, I think you hit on it too. It's not just ketogenic, it is fasting, and it's utilizing, the intermittent fasting. There's a lot of debate around what intermittent fasting is these days. But you do have to play with when you're eating, how much you're eating, the foods you're eating, and change it up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I almost think we need to come up, me and names. I like to think up names. And I'm sitting here thinking we need to come up with an idea behind using the keto diet with neurotoxicity. Because I feel like what happens to so many people is that they get off, they go to keto, they start to, maybe their brain fog clears up and maybe their energy goes through the roof, which I do see in menopausal and postmenopausal women. Is that stuff changes and they're like, my energy is better than it is before and I'm not losing weight. Right. And so the way that I describe it is that there's lifestyle, you have to customize a lifestyle with keto, fasting, variation, and then there's root cause. And if some people can go and customize this and they'll be just great. And other people have to go digging for root cause. But they're almost like two separate things, and you need to understand that if you're not getting a result.
I tell people all the time, you can't get healthy if you don't change the food you eat. But sometimes just by changing the food you eat isn't enough to get you healthy. Right. And everyone's a little different. So you're exactly right. I think maybe the three of us will have to brainstorm as to how we can coin or term what we do and how we look at things. But I don't know.
The Women in Wellness way.
There we go. There we go. Huh. Okay. Maybe there's a book.
There it is.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say, I say it from a place of compassion because I watch a lot of people struggle and they are frustrated because they're like, I'm doing it exactly right. I'm doing everything you told me to do. And yet there's a deeper root cause, and going after that deeper root cause isn't always easy. So, but it's sure as heck rewarding.
Yeah. Well, this is the beautiful thing about the podcast and like so many other resources online. There's so much education now out there about what kind of triggers are contributing to that load. I mean, maybe it's the products they're using, maybe it's their environment. Like there's so many like things, like you said, in their lifestyle that they could be doing every day, contributing to that root cause. So there's lots out there that you can learn, but it's work.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Or even if you go back to Libby Weaver, I'm going to keep quoting her until she comes on and we can interview her. But that was my takeaway from rushing. Oh, there we go. Rushing woman syndrome was my big takeaway was like, oh my gosh, I could do all the keto, all the fasting, all the detoxing I want. But if cortisol is still through the roof, I'm not in optimal health, and the body's not going to let go of weight if your cortisol is through the roof. You could fast for days and days and days, and your body still thinks it's in a crisis. So that's a huge root cause right there.
Yeah, and especially when if you're sitting in crisis every day in a survival zone, and then you fast, which is also creating some of that crisis state because we're teaching it to adapt. Your body's going deeper into crisis at that time. So you really have to address that portion absolutely in order to get the results.
Well, I think really what we're saying over and over again is everyone's unique, everyone's different, everybody has different stressors and different toxicities and different genes and lives in different parts of the world. And so it's really being compassionate with yourself about finding all of the triggers and the root causes and giving yourself the compassion to be okay with it not just falling into place. Don't get me wrong, we all want it to. If there was one magic pill or one magic wand, you know, we'd let you all know, but just giving yourself the permission to fail forward, right?
Yes, yes,
Keep
and
moving
enjoying the
forward.
journey,
Yeah.
and just being in the process of it, and not looking at that end result, but just what is this teaching me?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So keep listening. We're trying to give you guys, you know, answers and help you craft it for yourself. What I always say is don't give up on yourself, because the body is such a miracle. It is born to heal. And unfortunately, we're living in an environment that every day, between the chemicals and the emotional drain and, the world that we're living in just pulls us out of that healing state. And more than ever, we have to work at getting ourselves back into that healing state. And keto is a great first start, a really good first start. So don't throw it out just because it didn't give you the most optimal result that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And Sonia, what are we going to cover on our next ketogenic fasting podcast? If you want to give the listeners a little preview.
That's right. Hormones. We all have them. And they all sometimes control a bit of our life. Maybe we're a little irritable sometimes. Maybe we're losing a little bit of hair. But there's reason for all of that. And there's ways that we can use the ketogenic diet to help to support that hormonal system. So stay tuned for the next one.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one, because I get that question all the time. Hot flashes, people's periods start showing up. I've seen women come out of menopause, have been in menopause for like 3-4 years. They do the keto diet. All of a sudden they come out. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to address this one.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
If you've been enjoying the Women in Wellness podcast, please take 2 minutes to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes.
This helps more women find the podcast to get the information they have been searching for.
This way we can truly change the world one woman at a time.
Remember, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook,
where we're sharing information with women every single day.
Join us next week for another episode of Women in Wellness.
And as always, thank you for listening.